Welcome to the afternoon session of the Goode Intelligence Identity Futures 2020 virtual conference. For those of you returning to the conference, welcome back. And for those of you just joining us, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Just a reminder of some of the housekeeping points. Everyone except the session moderator, speaker, and panelists must be on mute. We will answer your questions at the end of the panel session. To ask a question, please use the Q&A facility. We'll get through as many questions as we can, but also make sure that we stay on schedule so that the event flows smoothly. We shall follow up with any unanswered questions after the event has finished. We'll be following up after the event with a link to the video recordings of the event. This afternoon, we have a 1-hour expert panel session entitled The Passwordless Odyssey Powered by Biometrics. I will be the chair and moderator, and will be joined by Alexey Khitrov, President of ID R&D, Martin Ingram, Identity and Access Management Product Owner at NatWestBank Group, and Saru Tumaluri, Women in Identity Ambassador for India. To set the scene, I would like to invite Alexey Khitrov to share his thoughts on the Passwordless Odyssey. Thank you, Alexey. Alexey, you need to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Okay, I hope it sounds better now.
Perfect.
Thank you so much again for this opportunity to introduce ID R&D and our vision of the passwordless future of authentication. Allow me to share a couple of slides to facilitate this discussion. And then I look forward to the feedback and the questions as we go along. Just click on the present. Before we start, let's talk about the kind of idea of the passwordless and why is it an important topic. So, you know, the way that the people could communicate with each other, the way that people communicate with technology in the enterprise is constantly changing. And I think authentication and security have been perceived as one of the bottlenecks in those communications. And one of the least convenient and least user-friendly experiences in any time of UX is the point of enrollment and in authentication. That's where we make the customer's life pretty miserable right now. And passwords are one of the worst parts of that experience. So that's why it's important to look at the way that technology can address this issue and provide new solutions to this problem. And bring new technologies to solve it, because the passwords themselves were actually invented about 2,000 years ago by the Roman army. So we really believe that it's time to advance the way that we recognize each other in the technology world and go into the 21st century. So before we jump into some specifics, a quick introduction of ID R&D. ID R&D is a global biometric technology leader. We are core biometric vendors, so we develop core technologies for some of the modalities that we see the most promising, and we solve some of the most difficult problems when it comes to biometric authentication. The areas and in the segments where we work, we're either #1 by the leading performance benchmarks, or we're unique providers. So if you're interested in voice and in passive facial liveness, we're the right technology provider for you. So let's talk about kind of the core experience at hand. When people meet their friends and family, they don't start that communication with providing a PIN, a secret passwords, or showing their driving license or a password or a passport. We know our friends, we know our relatives. We really don't need any additional data rather than seeing them or hearing them. We believe that a similar type of experience can be achieved through the use of the latest generation of AI. We're talking about the communication between the users and the technology, the users and the enterprise. So what we're building here is essentially a friend-like user experience. And the way that achieve this friend-like user experience is through the use of biometrics. Now, one of the first questions that we're being asked, so why do we need any additional biometrics versus the ones that are already can be found on the mobile devices that are in our hands and in the hands of our customers? And in order to answer these questions, we want to introduce this quick concept of enterprise-grade biometrics. So the biometrics that we can find on devices right now, they're great, but we need to understand that they're placed there for the purpose of convenience, not for the purposes of security. So if you're financial institutions who cares about the security of access to the mobile app and to the transaction that can be done through the mobile app, then utilizing a consumer-grade biometrics or the biometrics that can be found on devices is not a very good idea. Because there are ways to go around them in the mobile phone, because again they're for convenience, not security. And if you can go around them, and if you can replace the enrollment of the rightful owner of the phone with the enrollment of the bad guy, then you have access to all of the data on that particular phone. So that's why you do want to look for enterprise-grade biometrics that are not linked to a particular device, but would need to be linked to a particular app, to a particular person. So let's talk about how the mobile login done today. So typically it's done through some type of type in login, which of course it's either saved. So from security perspective, not a very good practice, or we need to type it in. And on average, adults right now in North America and Europe have between 40 and 50 accounts protected by passwords. So we're either facing too many passwords that we cannot remember, or we're just using one we just get a terrible idea from the security perspective. So the current generation of password-based or knowledge-based solutions, and it can be pins or passwords, one-time passwords, and so on, really provides a terrible user experience and also provides a pretty weak security. And that can be solved, and the biometrics is a great way to solve it. So again, we're looking at the enterprise-grade biometrics, which can improve the user experience and security through the very natural experience. So why are biometrics better? Because we're not asking the user to remember anything, right? We're not asking people to type anything. That biometrics can be done in a very secure way with no with no personal data being saved somewhere on a server, and it's also can work both on the device itself, but it can be done across multiple devices, across multiple channels. So if you're a bank and you want to make sure that people can be logged in on the mobile apps, on your call centers, on the chatbots, through the same identity, it can be achieved as well. So biometrics provide you a lot of flexibility. You can build it specific to the app, or you can build it specific to your organization. There are a lot of options that are on the table. It's also important to mention that the truly secure biometric solutions right now are answering two questions. Is this the right person? So is this Alexey? And then secondly, is this a person, or is this some type of a presentation attack? So if one can spoof my identity with the mask or or a picture or a video of me, then the integrity of the biometrics is compromised. So we really need to provide this powerful combo of the biometric and liveness solutions that work together. And it's also important, going back to the discussion on the user experience, is that they work in a passive way. So we're not asking the users to do any additional steps to confirm not just the identity, but also confirm its liveness. So there is actually a live person in front of the device, not a photo, not a recording of the audio, not some type of the presentation attempt. One of the new challenges that we're facing specifically in 2020, of course, is COVID. So what we're seeing is that the traffic to the branches is significantly down, and in some cases it's non-existent when there's a lockdown. So so the banks want to redirect that traffic to the remote channel. There's also a challenge of keep on onboarding new customers, and there is a very convenient way to do it through the KYC compliant process, where the customer would take a photo of the government ID, the customer takes a selfie for the facial matching. There's a liveness check, to make sure, because that's the biggest security threat. It's not so if somebody takes my document or steals the image of my document and then goes on my Facebook page and can present my picture, that's the biggest threat, not that somebody can find my non-existent identical twin. So there are ways to enroll people and confirm their identity through the means of biometric. And what's exciting here is that once we use the biometrics to enroll people, then the natural extension of this process is continue using the biometrics to authenticate people as we're taking them through this passwordless journey. So once we enroll the people during the onboarding, and we can enroll them, with facial biometrics, we can also ask people to to leave a voice sample by reading a couple of numbers or a simple phrase, hi, it's Alexey, let me in, or something like that. And then from that point on, we can use these biometric modalities, voice and face together. We actually like the combination of voice and face a lot, because both biometrics can be collected at the same time. So again, simplification of the user experience, or they can be deployed separately, depending on the situation, depending on where you are in the user experience. So you can have one process for routine login. You can have double biometric step-up authentication for some more risky transactions. So you have a dynamic system of using the biometrics there. And then what's really exciting is that you can use this biometric identity across various channels that your customers are using while communicating with the financial institutions. Once enrolled in mobile, you can use the same enrollment in the call center. You can use the same enrollment in the virtual assistant chatbot, therefore creating the very seamless and frictionless experience for the user from the authentication standpoint. So how does it work? A very kind of simple use-step process. So say you want to get into the mobile banking at the ID R&D bank. Very simple. You press on the login. So in this example, we're using multimodal approach. So we're collecting voice and face. So you click on login. You say, "Oh, open my account." While you're doing it, while you're reading off the screen, your picture can be taken. And based on this one-click approach, you can have a completely secure access to the banking app. What's unique about this approach is that from the user perspective, it's a one step, but from the perspective of the bank, you actually have 4 layers of security checks. You have facial recognition, you have voice recognition, you have facial liveness, and you have voice liveness. So you're checking both. Again, the matching, is that the right face, is that the right voice, and you're also checking liveness. It's a separate technology that works in parallel in completely passive or frictionless way. So and the combination of these 4 modalities, the 4 checks, provides an extremely secure but extremely convenient user experience for the users, and it protects financial institutions from various presentation attacks. It can also be deployed again as an enterprise-grade biometrics on the app level or on the enterprise level. So there's no reliance on the technology that's already on the phone. So the enterprise actually controls the user experience, controls the risk management, and controls all these various checks that are available. So essentially here we are replacing this this old password and the unsecure and inconvenient password with a convenient process and 4 layers of security. And what's also very exciting is that these 4 layers of security greatly enhance the accuracy of the biometrics. So we can really increase the accuracy of on one modality about 100 times through the combination of these modalities together. So a very simple step for the users to simplify their user experience, to get rid of the passwords, to get rid of the idea that we need to remember or store the password somewhere, and switch to much more convenient and much more secure passwordless future. Alan? Alan, now you're mute.
You're right, it's catching. So thank you, Alexey. That was an excellent introduction to the subject. And I would now like to invite Saru and Martin to join us for the panel session. If they can unmute themselves, please. And I'd like to start off by asking a question initially to Martin about what are some of the challenges that you face as a product owner in a large UK retail bank in moving towards a passwordless environment?
Yeah, numerous, I suppose. Fundamentally, as a bank, we need to manage risk, and we do have a number of large risks there because we look after money, and it's people's money. We need to make sure we're looking after it in a responsible way, and we're managing the risk of identification and authentication going wrong. Passwords have been with us for a while, and I think none of us would argue that they're a good solution. They are what the customer knows at this point, though. And so it's not as if we can instantly abolish them, because the change to the customer base, and we're dealing with, what, 17 million people here, it is too much for them. So it's something where we're introducing the new modalities, a lot of which are based on biometrics. And over time, we'll reduce our reliance on passwords until hopefully at some point in the future, they can go. But it needs to be a progression, because we can't make that switch overnight. But we're also lacking a few technologies in the space as well, I suppose. But for what we're finding is that for the small proportion of people who cannot or don't want to use biometrics, we need to offer an alternative, and that needs to be there and available. And so what is it? At the moment, the obvious thing is to say, well, okay, the current state continues for a bit more for a proportion of the user base. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And, as always, we're looking for how we can make things better for people who don't want to use biometrics or can't use biometrics, but could perhaps use other technologies. But as I say, it's going to be a progression. It'll take us some time.
Okay, thank you. Saru, can you kind of add to that at all in terms of your experience, in terms of moving towards, a passwordless experience from, in terms of your experience? Saru, over to you.
I didn't realize I missed the part that was directed to me. Yeah, thanks, Alan. Thank you, Martin and Alexey. So I represent women in identity from my country, India. So I think while Martin is right that it'll take us a while to get on to the passwordless Odyssey, for developing countries like India especially, and while we are trying to get the our 1.3 billion population on to the banking sector, I think it's very, very important that we come up with solutions like the biometrics for the password or for onboarding, specifically because this device has reached a lot of customers, right? I mean, Androids are getting very cheap. Correct. I mean, in India, you can literally get it for probably $40, $30, right? But not everybody is sophisticated enough for password management, right? So are they sophisticated to manage their passwords, right? But while they face what they have, right, especially with our mobiles, can be captured very, very effortlessly, right? So I think, when I see our help, when we see the gardeners in our complex, etc., you give them a bank and then ask them to remember passwords, it is never going to happen, right? So I think, especially so more than the economically advanced countries, for developing countries like India, passwordless onboarding, passwordless logins will be the need of the times that we go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And just to remind people to please ask some questions through the Q&A facility at the bottom of your screen. I've got a kind of a couple of questions, a couple of comments from Joe Carson. Hi, Joe. So the statement is passwordless is misleading. These less interactive passwords. Passwords are moving to the background, which means less password interactions, and they're not going away anytime soon. And I think Martin was alluding to that. Really, it's going to be an evolution. And also a kind of a question on whether biometrics should be replacing passwords, and are they more secure, and should they be used for verification or security control? So perhaps that's a question for Alexey. So it's questioning the kind of perhaps the security around biometrics and whether they're any better than passwords.
Well, my view may be a little bit biased. So don't expect me to say that passwords are better than biometrics. I think that passwords are, quite honestly, I think they're terrible. Again, they represent terrible user experience because we all keep on forgetting our passwords. We were constantly are asked to reset them. Some organizations are asking them to change them quarterly, and now you have to have 3 capital letters, 3 signs, and 3 hexagrams. And you need to remember them, and they must be unique, and you cannot repeat them. So it's kind of getting ridiculous. And I really think that biometrics can definitely replace that experience. I think Martin is absolutely right that it will take time. I think an important issue that we didn't talk about here, but I think that that's where we're going is communication and education of consumers. Why biometrics are better, what are the benefits to them, because we can talk about the benefits for the enterprise, because if you're switching to biometrics, you don't need the infrastructure for the password reset. You don't you're saving a lot of money on fraud that uses passwords, or social engineering that allow bad guys to go and take over accounts and do the bad things. So the biometrics is a great thing for the enterprise, but I think we need to communicate why the biometrics are a good thing for consumers, and that's why when we talk about it, we talk about the combination of security and user experience. Because isn't that better for consumer if we go to say no more passwords? You don't need to remember anything. You don't need to type anything. You don't need to, write them on a paper on the side of your computer for different accounts, or you feel embarrassed when you keep on forgetting and keep on plugging different parts, the different password that you think you might associate with this account. Don't you want to just say no to all of that? And the overwhelming answer is yes. We don't want to do that. This is terrible. So so the question is, can technology deliver on this combination of security required by the enterprise and convenience that's desired by consumer? And I think that we're at the point when through the recent advancements in AI, the answer to both is yes. We can deliver that. And from security perspective, one of the key elements that was just recently added, and mostly in 2020, is the introduction of passive liveness. So when we talk about, the deep fakes will take over, or the people can spoof the biometrics, well, liveness is taking care of it. So that's why it's so important to establish the integrity of the biometric check. So we know how to match. So the matching is more or less a solved problem. The key is, how do we make sure that it's not spoofable? And the introduction of the latest key capability in passive facial liveness, for instance, or in passive voice liveness, allows to make that check without asking a user to do anything. So there's no additional user experience. We just take a selfie that's used for the matching, and the technology can now say whether it's an actual person, whether it's a picture of an actual person, or it's a picture of a person, or a picture of some type of presentation at that. And this is, I think, was one of the key missing elements that was creating additional friction. How do we make sure it's a live person? And that was a big question specifically for the onboarding. So when you have established a relationship with the customer, when we know the device, when we have some additional information, it's easier to establish this liveness. But when it's the first contact, when we don't know anything about the user, that's where this liveness check is extremely important. And I think that now that we can build the trust on the security side with the combination of matching and liveness, and we can introduce the frictionless approach to the user. It's essentially take a selfie, that's it, or say or send us the voice message in the WhatsApp, and we'll use that for the biometric check. That's, I think, is a missing element of convenience that would really help to make that shift from traditional passwords to the biometric passwordless future.
So what about the argument that biometrics are not secret? They can be, if someone steals my fingerprint or my face or my voice print, then that can be replayed against the service provided to fool the authentication system. How do you counteract that argument?
Well, typically the biometrics are not stored in the form of audio files or pictures. They're typically stored as so-called the biometric templates. So it's binary files with a bunch of ones and zeros. So if you get a file of a bunch of ones and zeros that cannot be reverse engineered into my voice or into my face, yeah, well, you can have it. Go at it. It's just not going to help you. So once you start explaining this, and on top of that, you can encrypt it. You can put a hash on that. There are a lot of other things that the enterprise is doing. So there are a lot of protection layers that are there that really ensure the security of the biometrics. And actually, that's an argument against passwords, not the biometrics. So if I hack the system of some bank and steal 100 million passwords, well, then I have the passwords. If you have, a binary file that represents my voice, well, good luck using that.
So in terms of, obviously with the password, you can change it, but with the biometric, you can't, so.
Well, but having that, yeah, but that binary file, even if you have it and you figured out the encryption, if you figured out the hash that protects it, which is almost impossible, but let's say you did it, you're a genius, then it only makes sense within a particular vendor's algorithm. So if you change that, then it's a useless combination of ones and zeros.
Okay, thank you. So anyone else want to add to that, Martin, Saru, in terms of Martin, you talk about managing risks. So from your perspective, is the security of biometric systems good enough to replace passwords for accessing bank services?
Usually, it's not just about biometric. Frequently we'll look at a second factor of some sorts, and people who've lived through the Payment Service Directive version 2 secure customer authentication journey will know that sometimes fingerprints on a device is effectively saying we've seen this device before and it all was okay, can add to that, and so that gets you a second factor. I also think that the world we've come from, where there were just 3 factors, something something you are, something you have, right? Misses out on part of the new world, which is that we start to be able to use analytical techniques to work out what the risk looks like. If we know that I do something fairly low risk on a Monday morning, account balance inquiry or something, and it looks like that's what I'm going to do the next Monday morning, then okay, that contributes to what the risk looks like. It brings it down. If suddenly there's a large transfer to a new payee at a strange time of night, then that feeds into a different part of the risk equation. So it's not purely about the 3 factors that we think of from authentication. It's how do we understand the risk at this point in time.
Yep, that makes sense. Saru, have you any kind of comments on that, please?
Yeah, so I think in line with what Alexey was saying, it's a lot about there is security or risk issues on either side, but it is a lot about the security standards that get set up. Passwords can be as fragile. Biometrics can be fragile too, but the liveness test, the liveness indicators, whether it's passive liveness or active liveness with random questions, random numbers, which usually span the language range for different countries. So I think the liveness indicator is a very, very important part of passwordless journeys. So it's not just the biometric match, but the liveness, and liveness of course can come in very many flavors. So I think my submission is that there is risk both ways, but the biometrics actually offers lower risk if coupled with very, very strong liveness tests. Okay.
So what about the risk of, so the kind of, it's the pros and cons of using something inbuilt into a consumer device. So for instance, my smart speaker at home. So whatever Amazon Alexa is supporting, or whatever my smartphone, my iPhone, my Android device is supporting, versus something which which has been designed for enterprise grade. What are the pros and cons of using something built in versus something designed for a higher risk solution?
I'll take a quick punt at this one. I mean, fundamentally, what you're dealing with at that point is something that's tied to a low-grade identity. Now, you can tie that to your higher-grade internal bank identity, but it's not really under your control. So how the system reacts and how re-registration processes work within that vendor is outside of your visibility. And depending upon what you're doing, that might be okay. Typically for the sorts of things that we do in a bank, that doesn't work. So you fundamentally, you end up having to have a process and an understanding that samples, evaluates and checks against biometrics.
Okay. Yeah, there are a number of challenges here, and I touched on that a little bit in the presentation, the differences between the consumer grade and enterprise grade biometrics. I think one of the so we talked about the fact that the consumer grade biometrics on the phones, they're designed for convenience, and the ways around them are actually pretty easy to use. So if you're a bad guy, you know, to figure out the PIN, it's not you know, if you're good at it, you can do it. Whereas and then once you're in the phone, you go into the settings and you re-enroll your face, or you re-enroll your finger, and all of a sudden you have access to every single banking or personal apps that that phone might have. And this is a scary thought, because so again, we're thinking of the level of technology on the phone, and the technology itself is good. I'm not arguing that, you know, the guys that, you know, the phone manufacturers are doing the bad job with the technology. The technology is solid. The problem is that the purpose of technology is different than what is being used for, and that's why we always advocate for the enterprise grade biometrics, because it is a scary proposition, you know, for financial institutions, that we're trusting our security to a third party of which we have zero control, but we have all the liability. It's not the place where the financial institution want to be in, you know, just from security and risk management perspective. And then finally, one of the most exciting things about the biometrics is that the ability to use it cross-channel. So you can have the enrollment, you can do the login with your face or your voice, you know, on one device. A lot of people have multiple devices. Like you know, with voice, you can use it on your phone, and then you call the call center. Wouldn't that be great if you can just use the same same identity in both channels without having multiple logins for every single channel that the user might have with one financial institution? So if you're using the consumer grade or the biometrics that are on devices, you cannot do that. You have to have separate logins for each device. You have to have a separate experience for each channel, and this is just not a very good user experience. So using the enterprise grade biometrics allows you to manage the risk. You know, that's what Martin was talking about, that in the end of the day, it's about managing risks. And if you're controlling it, you can have a dynamic experience. Then if you're just logging in to take a look at your balance, well, it's not the end of the world if somebody else will see my balance. It's not good, but you know, it's not the end of the world. But if somebody is moving $1 million, then we want to make sure there's, you know, multiple layers or security attached. So the combination of this this ability to provide this dynamic experience from the security and risk management perspective, ability to provide cross-channel access, I think are very strong arguments towards the enterprise grade biometric versus the consumer grade.
That's a good point. Yeah. So you've touched on an interesting point about cross channels. So, and you know, I can see for me, two hats. One as a consumer and as someone who's worked in security teams in some big banks. It's great for me to have, I know, the ability to authenticate myself, you know, got cross channels and some of the emerging ones as well, you know, in the car, or at home, you know, when I go in branch to use the same authentication mechanism and credential. But from a practical point of view, and I'd like to hear Martin's, you know, his own kind of experience of this. How easy is it to actually deploy technology across a number of possibly disparate banking systems?
Yeah, clearly it's a challenge, but it's something that I think the business recognizes there's value in.
Okay.
Because, you know, the business don't like passwords either. They don't like most of the old authentication mechanisms, tokens and things, and that's fine. We do quite a lot of customer research, and we try to head to where our customers are telling us. And so it's a piece of work that kind of it needs to be planned for and done over time. We're even finding new, shall we call them channels? Things like COVID's pushed us to understand how we could become truly contactless for a wider range of service deliveries, in many different places, be it shops or bank branches and whatever. There are more opportunities now. Think of them as channels if you want, but actually they're opportunities to do business.
That leads me on to a question from the floor, probably for you, Martin. Is that from Andre about biometric payment cards? And obviously, it means that it's people are used to them now, of using Touch ID and Android fingerprint systems. What are what is the mindset from a retail bank in terms of the possibility of rolling out pieces of plastic with fingerprint sensors in them?
Yeah, I mean, not wishing to be trite, but it comes down to two words: interesting, but expensive. And I'm going to lean back on the what does the risk look like. I'm sure that there are some parts of the business, some risks that the bank takes, where that's entirely appropriate. Would we do it for the majority of the retail estate? Unlikely at the price points we're seeing at the moment.
Okay, but there's a lot of surveys out there. We've actually we did one over the summer in the UK, and the consumer demand is there, and especially in COVID for touching or not touching kind of shared pin pads. So and
that's actually one of the interesting things that COVID has done, is it's forced us to do an experiment of what happens if we introduce increase the transaction limit on tap and go. I was wondering early on in COVID whether we would actually see an increased loss, and no, we don't. So bigger sums, still good. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. Obviously, India is the home for the largest biometric identity program in the world with Bidadar. What are you seeing? And perhaps what's your kind of view in terms of the ability to use a state-issued biometric identity for other services like financial services? What is your experience there?
So yeah, Alan, that's a very good point. And you're right, India rolled out the largest biometric based identification system back in 2012. And I think by now, almost, I would say 95% of our population is on it. So other than, what started out was for the subsidies, which is the government subsidies. And I think COVID was a great example. Because who were impacted were not, digital workers like myself, because we are all in the tech sector, we could all work from home. But the migrant labor, the folks that have a lot of contact, right? They were the ones that were impacted the most. And these biometric-based systems that came up, right, a few years back were really, really helpful because they could identify themselves with their fingerprint. Of course, that had contact, but now with the face. And like I mentioned, so these identification systems have been our backbone in India, not only for government subsidies, but also for financial inclusion. As a lot of you are probably reading, there's a huge fintech revolution going on in India. And and while this affects tier 1 and tier 2, people like us in Bangalore or the large metros, a lot of solutions are getting rolled out for the tier 2, tier 3. And this is where I see biometrics having a great impact, right? I mean, again, I come back to people who are not educated, right? But they, as Alexey rightly put it, in real world, when I meet you or I meet Martin, I don't have a keypad, right? And we just see each other's faces, and that's what registers. And now with technology there, This is an amazing way to provide a lot of solutions to the remotest parts of India. So it's been a huge success. We've had our, I would say, activism around it.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of resistance. There was a scare that it would become a big brother. This came up in another panel that I was attending, that where the security is a concern, of course, for everyone, but privacy, I mean, is privacy, if it's privacy versus food in my stomach or food in my stomach for my family, not that privacy is less important to anyone, but I think the bulk of India, and I mean, I've been part of many surveys, I've myself conducted it. The thought is that if this can lead to 100% subsidies reaching me without a middleman in it, I am fine giving my biometrics, whether it's my 10 fingerprints, my iris, or my face. So I think overall, the activism was good because the security measures came in place. There was a lot of law that came around privacy. We are having a new privacy bill rollout in India. Hopefully it'll become law sometime in 2021, just like the GDPR. There'll be data protection because data is, I mean, we all know the new oil, so that needs to be protected. But I think overall Aadhaar was a great success, a wonderful pole vaulting ID system that was put in place. I won't even call it leapfrogged. I'd say we pole vaulted. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Outside of Aadhaar, is there any kind of, what's the adoption or the deployment status on perhaps banks or telecommunication providers in terms of rolling out their own biometric identity and authentication solutions?
So it's catching up pretty big. So in India, I mean, like most other countries, the banks and telco providers are regulated entities. They all roll up to a government department or a government organization. So at this point, because Aadhaar was actually developed in a very, very futuristic manner, it's a completely API-driven, JSON-handled, pure digital system. So everybody, including the telcos, including the banks, are able to leverage it. And it's in a very interesting, almost an FMCG model where there is layers built in there. And everybody needs to get a license from the government, which is very, very a quick and a clean process. And they all can leverage this one enrollment system or this one, you may call it the huge database that the government helped put together. So we call these public rails, right? So just like the physical rails of railroads and trains and, the tarred roads and all of that, these are the digital highways of India. So yeah, everybody is leveraging the same thing, Alan. Nobody is building out their own biometric systems.
Okay, that's really good insight. Thank you.
Yeah.
And another question on Alexey's mentioned it. You mentioned it, Saru, about the importance of liveness detection. Now, obviously, there is. If you go on YouTube and you look at the kind of the gummy bear attacks on fingerprint, if you look at the kind of the attacks on some of the the less secure smartphone-based kind of facial recognition solutions. So if you could just talk us through the importance of liveness in terms of the security of a biometric authentication solution, please.
So I'll go first, and then of course Alexey can take it up. So as I mentioned it earlier, I think liveness is probably the most important factor.
Cool.
You're mute.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And what we have seen with the different solutions in India is you could have lower friction and lower assurance, or higher friction and higher assurance. But the role of liveness cannot be understated. Again, it can be the passive liveness that Alexey spoke about. It can be very obvious ones, but that is a very, very important part. And again, that mimics real life, right? I meet Alan or I meet Alexey. I don't expect you guys to be a frozen statue, right? There's a lot of movement happening. My brain is processing a lot of data when I'm speaking to you. So that is exactly the action that needs to be mimicked in real world. In the digital journeys.
definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alexey?
Well, we're certainly very big believers in liveness. We really think that this is that was the missing piece for the trust in the biometric matching, because what's the value of the good matching if you can match yourself, but also a photograph of yourself. So it's not really good from the security perspective. So but then historically, the way that this issue of liveness was addressed, so originally, if you want to open a bank account remotely, banks would schedule a Zoom session with you, right? And then a live operator will talk to you. You have to sit with your document next to your face, and they'll make sure, is it really you? Which of course kind of kills the whole concept of opening an account from anywhere at any time, because that's not what happens. It also costs a lot of money to have this army of people sitting and just talking to new customers all day. So, and not to mention just the kind of terrible user experience. Then the technology evolved and enabled for so-called active liveness, so which would be blink 3 times, turn your head left, right, up and down, smile, move the phone in a certain way, left and right. And although it does provide a decent accuracy, what we learned from the market is that people didn't want to do it. They just simply, because the process is already cumbersome. Like, it's not the happiest part of your life when you're onboarding and providing information, opening account, or going through authentication, and further complications not helping at all. We spoke to one of the leading European banks that run a pilot with an active liveness, and what they've reported is that they've been losing up to 50% of customers at the liveness step. Not overall, but specifically on the liveness step, because you need to explain to the user, now you do this, and then you do that, and that's how we know that it's you. And people just couldn't be bothered doing that. So so that's why we firmly believe that the liveness must be done passively. So we just need to use whatever data is available during the normal interaction between the user and the technology to actually confirm the liveness of the user. And this is why we think that 2020 was a breakthrough year from the perspective, because this year we've seen that the passive liveness is starting to pass some of the most strict e-industry standards, including ISO 30701, which is considered the kind of the industry golden standard, both level 1 and especially level 2. These are very difficult tests to pass, but we're starting to see passive liveness, single frame liveness solutions to pass those certifications. And I think that allows the enterprise to actually start actively using them. And at our company, we're seeing a tremendous growth in transactions, specifically on the passive facial liveness, and even more specifically on the onboarding processes, because that's the point of a very high risk for various institutions. So we really think that not just the liveness, but the passive single frame liveness is the answer to the challenge that we have today.
So this is a very, in terms of liveness and it seems to be quite similar to the antivirus industry, and the fact that you've got you're getting malware that it's morphing, it's it's attacking systems, and then the AV solution, signature-based stuff will come out and detect that. So for me, and it is very, it can be quite complex. So do you think that the buy side, like when you go into a discussion with an organization to sell your solution, do you think there's enough education, enough information on the buy side to understand the kind of what the ISO standards are, what FIDO presentation attack detection working group is working on?
No.
So it's still some work to be done. So Martin, were you aware of the ISO standards on presentation, attack detection, and liveness?
I wasn't. I'm sure some of my people are, but I wasn't in particular. Fundamentally, you know, without liveness, then the quality of the authentication is very low. You know, because it is so easy to get around it. You know, we live in a world where it's competitive amongst the banks to dissuade attackers. You know, we need that attackers go somewhere else. If you have a glaring weakness, then you can expect to be the target of a lot of attention. If you deal well with all these issues, then perhaps they spend most of their time elsewhere. So the extent to which you're getting attacked reduces as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So we're coming up to the end. We've got 3 minutes until the 3 o'clock GMT mark. So any closing remarks from any of you guys in terms of perhaps to ask you, you know, in terms of, I always find it very amusing to hear the death of this, the death of that, the death of you know, cache, the death of passwords. So when we, if you can have a date in terms of when we will not be using passwords, when will that be, Alexey? Crystal ball.
Well, I think to Martin's point, I don't think that there's going to be, you know, like a there's going to be a specific date. I think this is we'll see this process kind of slowly happening. It's like I think Alan, it's a great comparison with cash, right? So, you know, we still have some cash in our wallets, but do we mostly use cards in our everyday life? You know, yes, we do. So is cash completely dead, or there's still a combination? So I think for majority of the users, the biometrics we will be the way to do authentication and onboarding very, very soon. I think we've seen some important technology breakthroughs specifically around liveness recently, and I think they remove some of the kind of remaining skepticism about biometrics from security perspective. We're also seeing some improvements on the technology side with regard to the size of the solution. So now they can be deployed, you know, on the mobile apps, on the chips, and so on. So I really think I don't think we're looking at months, but I think within a few years, majority of the logins into the remote access, be it through call centers, be it through the virtual assistant, be it through mobile apps, are going to be done through the biometric check.
Thank you. All right. So thank you to Alexey, Sarah, and Martin for an interesting dive down into how we can move towards a passwordless future with the help of biometrics. This finishes the afternoon session. Please join us later for our evening fireside chat on the touchless passenger journey, starting at 6 p.m. GMT. Thank you very much.